Hey, how are we doing everyone? Welcome back. So today we're out riding on the awesome Kawasaki ZX-9R and I have some news around this motorcycle. So it did fail its MOT on a head bearing. Now I didn't even know that was an MOT failure, but basically this middle shaft here goes all the way through and there's bearings in between, and that's what basically turns the steering for you. So it failed on that, but I'm a little bit annoyed about that because, I mean, it's not really a big deal. It wasn't clunking. It wasn't like any more difficult to control than it normally would have been. So basically, I mean, the way you can tell if your head bearing is gone is if when you turn the handlebars, it gets notchy and then it loosens up a little bit. I mean, the front wheel might feel a little bit weird, a little bit like if you've ever had like a semi-flat tire on your front wheel. It might feel a little bit like that, but it never really caused me any problems whilst I was out riding. And of course it's been like that the whole year that I've had this motorcycle. So basically today we're going to run through all the costs that this motorcycle has had over this last year and whether or not it's actually been worth it at the end of the day, because I like to champion these old bikes. I like to try and keep them on the road for as long as possible, but if you are going to buy an old bike like this, and I want all of you lot to go into it knowing exactly what potentially it could cost you over your ownership, whether if it's just a year, 2 years, 3 years, all the little things that you will probably have to do on the old bike, including the steering head bearing. Right, but let's jump on and let's get out of here, shall we? All right, everyone, so I've probably spent on this bike about 400 quid, 500 quid. And bearing in mind that it cost me £1,450 to begin with. So the things that I've had to do, the steering head bearing, all right, that I actually got done by a professional because I don't know if I have the equipment really to do that myself. But next time I'm actually buying an old bike like this, I'll test that out, and if it needs doing, then I'll look to try and do it myself there, and at least I know now pretty much what the symptoms are and that it is an MOT failure. So the steering head bearing, the clutch, as we did basically right at the start of our ownership of this bike, our little journey with this bike, that was one of the first jobs that I did. Brake fluid, and also the front brakes need doing as well. The front brake pads are, well, they're close to the legal limit. So I mean, to be fair, they'd probably be all right for another year, and last time I checked them, I mean, they seemed all right, but that was a good few months ago. So those brake pads cost me another 30 quid. I'll do those in another video just before I sell the bike. I'm not sure exactly what price I'm going to sell this bike at, but I do want it shifted fairly quickly so we can bring in the next bike. But basically when this bike is sold, it's going to be absolutely perfect. It's going to have nothing that needs doing whatsoever. It's going to be a completely clear MOT. So the next person who rides it, well, they shouldn't have any issues with brakes, tires. One thing that I think this bike probably does need is a new chain. The back end of the chain is a little bit rusty on the far side of the chain. It's a little bit loose as well. So probably a new chain and sprockets would be perhaps the only thing you'd have to do on this bike, really. But then again, it's good enough, I think, for a bike of this age and what have you. I think the chain is all right, and they didn't mention anything about it on the MOT. So they did mention it was a little bit loose, so they adjusted it. I mean, I adjusted it myself, but obviously I didn't quite do it enough. But so the chain is still all right. It's still in good nick. But I mean, that's the thing with these old bikes, you end up getting a little issues here and there, and of course the indicator stuff as well. I had to get that indicator relay. I had to get, what else was it, the voltage regulator as well. So that cost me about 30 quid. The voltage regulator cost me, I think, 10 quid. And they were fairly easy jobs to do anyway, so no labour. But yeah, all in all, between £500 and £600 is probably what I've spent on this motorcycle, and half of that work I've actually done myself. The only thing was the head bearing that I didn't do myself. So if you include labour, and the head bearing was basically £150 labour. So if you include all the labour, let's say £50 an hour, then I mean, all in all, I probably would have spent close to maybe £800. Because even though a lot of the jobs on this bike were fairly easy, it still eats into a mechanic's time. So 700-800 quid all in is probably what I spent on this motorcycle, which is quite a lot. Really, when it comes to these kinds of bikes, if you have to spend more than 50% of its value on maintenance and things like that, fixing things, then it's probably not worth it. Now I know that there are a lot of bikers out there that probably do that anyway because they do a lot of the work themselves and things like that, and that's all well and good. These bikes really, they only stay on the road because of motorcycle enthusiasts who are willing to put the work in, put in that effort, spend the money to keep these bikes on the road. Even though this bike has done, what, 38,000 miles? You know, it's not a lot of mileage. But because of its age, unfortunately, yeah, things just start going wrong as time goes on. Things that prospective owners will have to fix, at least for things like MOTs. And it really kind of annoyed me, actually, the head bearing, because it really didn't cause me any problems whilst I was riding. And I don't know, man, I suppose it's a little bit like when the ZZR had that kink in the wheel. Had to get that pushed out, and that cost me 100 quid. And it's like, but it didn't cause me any problems. It didn't cause any flat tires. It never caused any balance issues or any issue. It didn't cause me any issue whatsoever, so I didn't even notice it. You know, it's just stupid little things like that MOTs kind of pick up that really don't matter. It just annoys me. But anyway, it is what it is. That's what we've got to deal with it here in the UK, and that's probably why the French aren't that happy with having MOT testing done on motorcycles in their country. Which is why they're probably doing all those protests. But it is a pain, and especially when it comes to these older motorcycles, because you know, if you buy one of these things, you probably have to spend money on it. It doesn't matter how much money the previous owner spent on it, and if it's got a fresh MOT, you can pretty much guarantee that the following year you're going to have to spend some money to make sure that it goes through its next MOT. And so every year, basically, you're going to be spending quite a lot of money. You know, and the previous owner as well, they had receipts of 600 quid, 800 quid, and that's in their ownership. And I don't think they had this bike for very long. I think they had it maybe for a couple of years. So, you know, you can imagine how much it's costing each consecutive person. So the thing is, I still think that it's worth it, alright? Yes, it is a pain, but all in, I mean, I've paid less than £2,000 for this motorcycle, and that is still cheap. I mean, for the amount of bike that you're getting, and it's had no issues with the engine, carburetors, nothing like that. It's been top notch the whole time, and I've really put this bike through the ringer, alright? We've redlined it a load of times, we've over-revved it, we've dropped it, we've done all sorts of things to this bike, and it's perfectly happy. It loves it, man. This is, honestly, what a trooper this bike is. And despite the fact that it's old, it's not that far off a lot of modern stuff. So don't be afraid to overlook these kinds of bikes if you are on a tight budget and you can't get that R1, or you can't get that, I don't know, that ZX-10R or something like that. Don't be afraid of looking at something like this. It'll do you really good, honestly. This has been one of the best motorcycle purchases I think I've ever made, despite the fact that it has cost me a little bit of money. But for me, I think it's been worth every penny. And especially if this is your one and only bike, well, it's not really a big deal. And I don't know if motorcyclists really care as much about the overall value of the motorcycle. The experience for them is more important. and so it has a bit more sentimental value in some ways. I don't know, that might be a naive thing to say, but you know, yeah, I'm looking to sell this bike, but I don't want the next owner to have a load of problems that they have to fix, or not an MOT, no MOT or something like that. I want this bike to be ready to go when the person who buys this bike takes it off me. I want them to have as much fun as I have over the last year and not have to worry. And this is one of those bikes where they don't have to worry about a single thing. But honestly, despite the fact that this bike has probably cost me more than what it's economically worth, I am not running a motorcycle dealership. I'm not running on profit margins, things like that. And to be honest with you, if I can get the amount of money that I paid for it back, then I'll be happy. If I can get 1,500 quid for it, which is about the going rate for these kinds of bikes, then I'll be happy as Larry. And it's really annoying because even though underneath this bike is pretty much spot on, the fairing does let it down a little bit. There's marks and cracks and all that kind of stuff, scratches, whatever, you know. So I could get a fairing kit, a new fairing kit for this bike, but that's going to cost me another 300-400 quid. And you got to think to yourself, well, is it worth it, you know? To some people, it might well be worth it. But for me, who's looking to buy these bikes, kind of use them and abuse them, make sure they're looked after, of course, but use them kind of up to their limits and then shift them, I'm not really looking to get sparkling bikes fresh off the showroom floor out the factory, you know. I'm looking to get rough and ready bikes that are good to go. And this is one of those motorcycles. No, it's not going to be the prettiest thing in the world, but it's going to give the next rider after me a really good time. And the fact that it's going to be keeping up with pretty much anything else that's on the streets today, you're not going to have any problems keeping up with your buddies no matter what bikes they've got. Even on a ZZR 1400, if they got something like that, you'll be able to keep up with them. You'll be able to keep up with them on something like this. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. One of my favorite bikes. Seriously, I've loved every minute of every day I've been able to have a go on this bike, man. And like I said, this is kind of like one of my favorite bikes I have right now, because it's a trooper. It wants to keep going. It still has plenty of life left in it, as long as someone is willing to spend a little bit of money here and there to keep it on the road. But I have no doubt that by the next MOT, it's going to have something else that needs doing. And I think that's probably the most important thing to take away from this video. If you're looking at a motorcycle like this, an old R1 or an old ZX-9R, an old, I don't know, 929, 954 Fireblade, or I don't know, maybe an old 600 or something like that. It doesn't matter really what the bike is, but if you're looking at something like that, then these are the kinds of things that you have to look out for. Things like fork seals, that's a very common one. People will try to flog a motorcycle with blown fork seals. People will try to flog a motorcycle with worn tires and things like that and say, oh yeah, they're absolutely fine, when they're pretty much gone. So these are all things that you will have to come to terms with, I think, before you actually pull the trigger and before you spend money on the bike that you're looking at. And I know we've kind of approached this topic before, but it's only at the end of an experience or the end of an ownership with these kinds of bikes is when you really have a full picture of what these bikes are going to cost you. And the thing is, I mean, that might not be a lot. 700-800 quid might not actually be as much as what you may be paying for some other bikes out there. And the fact that this is cheap to begin with, imagine buying a 954 Fireblade, which is probably going for more than one of these, or even 929 Fireblade, they're probably going for more than these bikes are. And you have to pay £800-900 on top of that every year. to keep them on the road. Yeah, I think this is still an absolute cracker in terms of value for money, price to performance. This has been a really good bike, I think, for anyone who is looking for something like this, where you've got a load of performance on tap for budget money. ZX-9R right now, I think, is the king of budget superbikes. Definitely go and have a look. Have a look yourselves. I'm sure that there'll be one nearby that's in a similar kind of condition, not perfect, but in a similar kind of condition for a similar price. Yeah, what a pleasure it's been to own this motorcycle. I'm not sure how many more videos we're going to get to shoot on this bike, but I don't know, there might be a couple more. It depends on when it sells, but the insurance runs out in a month's time. So I'll be doing as many videos as I can on this bike up until the insurance runs out. And in the meantime, of course, if I don't know if anything else happens to this bike, then I'll let you guys know. But this hasn't skipped a beat. It's been seriously good. I can't fault it at all. And just because things like MOTs say that there's something wrong with the bike when there probably isn't, you know, or at least it doesn't affect the way the bike rides, the way the bike handles. You do see in forums and things about head bearings, but honestly, most of the time it doesn't cause any problems. It's like wheel bearings. Wheel bearings are one of those things that I think is a failure on an MOT. Yet people in the United States drive with blown wheel bearings for such a long time. You know, it just makes noise. Just makes an annoying noise. It doesn't really affect the car in any way. But I don't know, everyone. Anyway, you guys let me know what you think down in the comment section below about the awesome Kawasaki ZX-9R, and whether or not this is a kind of motorcycle that you are thinking of buying in the near future, or you have bought one, and does your experience on that bike sit kind of in line with the experiences that I've had on it. I've really enjoyed it. I've loved every second of this bike, and I really think it's been worth every penny, despite the fact that I've had to pay a little bit of money to keep this bike on the road. I think it's well worth it, and the next owner, I think, is going to appreciate this bike pretty much just as much as I do. But there you have it, everyone. As always, leave that like, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss any more of our content going forward on the ZX-9R or on any other bikes going forward. We'll catch you all in the next video, everyone. Take care. Ride safe. Woo!